thank you so much for coming out this evening. Thankfully it's cool in here, so we can escape the heat, because it's too much for this British Constitution, I'm telling you. Give me some rain. But anyway, I always try not to be too ungrateful, because Phoenix, Arizona is so much worse. Lived there for a while. So the subject tonight is taking the concepts of grief, loss and trauma, looking at these as potential doorways for greater spiritual transformation. That is not something when you are in the midst of your experience that you are able to take on, take on board, or even contemplate. But one of the reasons that I really wanted to talk about this, my experience, I'm currently a grief specialist. I work as a contractor with Winter Spring, who I've been with on and off in different capacities since 2003. Winter Spring supports grieving people, all ages, across the spectrum, and are now under the umbrella of La Clinica. And so I teach, I facilitate groups, I do one-on-one work, and do their trainings. But grief is something that I have been interested in personally because of my journey and my evolving experiences. You know, sometimes we teach what we need to learn, and that's been my experience with this whole subject. I actually do, we have a Saturday group for grief support. And in that group, everyone gets to share their journey, and we can talk about, you know, what is happening, what is current. But what I have been noticing and loving is seeing little kind of nuggets of desire for more, to know more about who we are, why this has happened, why did this awful experience, a tragedy, perceived, a trauma, why did this happen, and how can I make sense of it? And so that led me to do this talk this evening, especially for a lot of the people that have come here tonight, because you get chance then to just take it a little bit wider than we're used to. As I say, grief, loss and trauma, when you're in it, and I would say, you know, certainly in the first few years, to talk to someone about, you know, the opportunities for your spiritual transformation, you know, it's like, give me a slap, you know. It's not something I would open up in that moment unless it was spontaneous and came in. Because when we're in that raw, icy plunge of grief, we can't think about anything else. We become very self-isolating. In fact, let's look at this and talk about grief, loss and trauma. Have I got it off?
The right, the one to the right.
Yeah, is it, have I turned it off by accident? Sorry. Technology and me. Maybe it was my EMFs.
Just don't work.
See, it's been, you know, sometimes that happens, doesn't it? It does with me and technology, I swear.
That's the second one?
That's it? First one? Yeah, I see plunge. Yeah.
That's working.
See? Thank you. Sorry. So, when we first encounter a deep loss, when we've had an attachment to an individual, whether that is child, sibling, parent, spouse, dear soul friend, whatever that is, that level of sudden wrenching heartbreak, and that literally is what goes on. We feel that throughout our whole being, and it is shocking, it's numbing, and there's a lot of disbelief around the whole experience, even when it's anticipated. Somehow, I know even in my own mind, when I was waiting, my mother was going to pass. I knew she would. I'd been seeing her slip away with dementia. But I remember the morning I got the phone call, and it was like a punch to the gut, So it doesn't matter if we are thinking it's going to come. When it happens, that knowledge, that awareness that that person is no longer here is so wrenching for us as human beings. Okay. So when we look at that kind of process, and I do not adhere to stages of grief. Grief isn't linear, it's chaotic. We are not human doings. We don't go through these nice, I'm in shock, now I'm in anger. Now, we don't do that. It's not how grief works. But unfortunately, the media have had hold of that for many years. And this was never the intention of Elisabeth Kubler-Ross's work. That wasn't how it was meant to be taken. But somehow it's been, that concept has been somewhat altered. And so humans, we want things neat and tidy, and we want it in boxes. So that, has a lot to do with it. But grief, if anything, is more spiral. It's much more a spiral experience. And yes, we can get a little stuck in certain places, but it doesn't mean to say we're not doing our work. It doesn't mean to say it won't continue to evolve. But there's no nice linear jump this through this hoop and that part's done, jump through the next. But when we know that, then we can say, oh, I'm not crazy. This is what grief is really like. Grief is chaotic. So that first few months is really incredibly raw and difficult, and we can be numb and not feel anything, or you can be feeling everything. You're any way, any part of the spectrum because of the depth of your own personal experience. And we're all really unique. So, these sudden traumatic types of death too that we've seen a lot of in the last few years, it's been compared to having a head injury. When we lose someone with that trauma encapsulating it. Indeed, when we have trauma as an event for ourselves, we go through grief and trauma brain. Now, I'm not going to get into discussing that in a big way this evening. There's a ton of stuff that you can Google on YouTube that will talk about that. But it's real. It's a real thing. How we then have to process and how we're so discombobulated around the experience. And one of the things as humans, we don't like to deal with our emotions, particularly in the West. Winter Spring as an agency, when they first started out supporting people who were bereaved, their whole idea was to educate the community, gather the community so that it could be kind of taken over, and these 4 nurses who set it up wouldn't have to do it. Any presentation I've ever done that's just on death or just on grief, it's usually not well met. And for many years, I was often introduced as, oh, this is the lady, she's going to make you cry. So that's how we are with this subject area. And it's just so exciting for me and just lovely to see so many people here to want to know more about where this can take us. So grief itself, just to define these concepts a little more, grief is what you feel, it's the internal stuff. It's all of the feelings, the emotions, the thoughts. So it's everything that's on the inside. And it's deep, and it's dark, and it can feel very desperate. And when we have all of that going on, the only way that we can get through is with mourning. Mourning is the expression. Mourning is what we do, moving what's inside outwardly. And there are so many different ways that we can do that. And actively mourning is the real key to our healing through grief and loss. And when we don't mourn, and as a culture, there are so many ways in which we defend against that emotional pain. We don't have as much ceremony and ritual as we used to. We can learn so much from our indigenous peoples about ceremony and ritual and how that brings such value, such beauty, and then such healing to these experiences. But we really need to mourn our losses in order to heal. C.S. Lewis, he used the term, oh, can we move along? Have I got it? Yes. Move along, Christine. Here we go. C.S. Lewis used the term shadowlands, going into the shadowlands, following the death of his wife. And that really describes this movement of going into darkness, because that's how it feels. We drop into the darkness, and we don't, there are times when we don't feel like we're ever going to see the light or even touch the light. And we can feel very lost. And then loneliness is another big factor. We can be surrounded by people, but we feel so desperately lonely in our experience of grief. But to grieve and mourn is our way through and out of the darkness, letting it out. Setting the grief free, it's the only way to heal the heart and soul, because this is a soul journey. It's sacred. Your bereavement, your grief, your loss, it is sacred. It really forces you into that sacred pause, to stop, to be here. And we kick and we fight and we do everything that we can not to, because we're not used to embracing pain, the emotional pain. Many times we'll put up with so much more physical than we will with our emotional stuff. And that's what we've learned. We've learned it as children. We've defended against it very early on. There's a great deal more work which I'll refer to by Dr. Gabor Mate. Might be a name to some of you that you know. Some beautiful work that he's done on the impact of held grief and how grief becomes embodied within us. And that's trauma then. That's now trauma because of its embodiment. But grief will keep rearing its head, and it will keep shouting to be heard in so many different ways. When we finally start allowing it, when we start feeling and embracing that deep pain, it's called the cracking of the heart phase. Isn't that amazing? That we're literally cracking open. Dr. Alan Wolfelt, another incredible teacher in this field, he prolific writer, tons of work, and he talks about this experience of when we start really diving into the depth of that pain, we're cracking open the heart, and that's how light gets in. So what do we mean by that? Well, it's about opening up to transformation. Dr. Gabor Mate tells us that the biggest calamity of our trauma and how we hold to the trauma is losing the connection to self. And he's not talking about our little self, ego. He's talking about our divine aspect. The real authentic nature, the truth of who you really are. All of that you feel when you get guidance intuitively, when you feel pulled to something, when you light up from expressing yourself with art, with writing, with gardening, or with the joy of a walk. You drop into that authenticity and it just feels so good. But a lot of the time, we have walled ourselves off from that in so many different ways. And grief and trauma are the biggest culprits, really, in our society. But the transformation can occur and begin when we start to listen. But we have to listen to what's going on inside of us. We have to clear that shadow, all the grief first. We have to start healing that trauma. And we listen to the thoughts, we connect with our emotions. And I love what Mark Nepo says. He says, not to feel is to stop the heart from breathing. Isn't that beautiful? Because that's absolutely true. We really have encrusted these valves of the spiritual heart in our culture. And it's not like, we're doing something wrong here. There's so many factors that have caused us to defend against our emotional pain. We grew up learning about that. And I can totally speak from that, my own personal experience of that, to defend against, multiple traumas as a child. And they don't have to be these incredible events. It can be these subtle things that we've had emotional abuse, or we're highly sensitive, trying to work in a world that isn't geared up for that kind of thing. So being on the spectrum of any kind means that we don't necessarily get those needs met. So there's many different things, but trauma is a wound, and it's restrictive. It forms a scar tissue, rigid, inflexible. When touched, we become defensive and we cannot grow emotionally. And then hypersensitive. And this was my personal experience. I certainly had much of this as a child. And that journey to overcome this, it can start in some of the most interesting small ways when we're open, when we invite the help in, whatever that means to you. Help comes in all kinds of different ways. But Michael Singer, some of his work, just again, lovely, incredible, and so insightful. What's stored with pain will release with pain. So it's no wonder that we don't want to touch into the pain, feel into it, because it's painful. So it's like, duh. Why would we want to do that? But the key is, as we begin to do that, as we begin to allow that movement, it becomes more and more, and it does get easier. But it's that initial stuff, like in your grief moment, in your raw, vulnerable, deep emotional pain, how difficult that is to work with that. And we're not supported in our culture. So when we begin to understand how we really are spiritually encrusted, I like what he says here. It becomes an energy blockage, this stored emotional pain. It stops energy from coming into our heart and mind. And eventually everything becomes negative, because the world of the senses must pass through this depressed energy before it gets to your consciousness. I remember a time being very much stuck in victimhood, feeling the victim, and operating from that space of life is unfair, everything's against me, looking outside for things to change, but not in here. Because at the time it was just too much, couldn't go there, couldn't do that. Well, my higher self, my divine aspect, had other ideas. And let's just say a 2x4 came and gave me a good slap. We don't want that. Let's ask for grace and ease. But I know many of you have had those experiences. And many folks who've had NDEs, near-death experiences, which I've also had. When we've had those experiences, those are the ones that, open things up. Grief is a doorway. Trauma is a doorway. When we begin to allow that, but we can do it a little more gently than having something like, a major car accident or a near-death experience. We don't want those. We don't have to have those. But I want to talk about one of the ways in which we can come to learn how to start connecting, to receive more of this transformational energy. What do we need to do? Well, I love this term, emotional agility. We need to learn to become more emotionally agile. And in this moment, I've completely forgotten the speaker who did an incredible TED talk, and this is where the term came from. I meant to write it down and I forgot, so apologies.
Emotional agility?
Emotional agility.
Brene Brown?
No. It might have been as well, but it was another lady, a South African. Anyway, but I just thought that term was so cool because it throws a whole different light. We can get our minds around something that's agile, when we're emotionally static or we're anchored in one place, or we need to move for health, we get that. Well, we need to do the same thing emotionally for our spirituality. So we learn to listen with an open heart. What does that mean? Well, we soften, we choose stillness. And that's really hard for most people, just to stop, just to calm down, just to choose that. And then simple, you see, the thing is about most spiritual work, most incredible shifts, it's not difficult in terms of it's a simple thing that we have to do, but it doesn't make it easy. So it's simple but really hard because we're very stuck in the ways and the types of things that we do. We're stuck in our belief systems, we're stuck in our perceived pain and our experiences. So, but learning simple awareness and our inner standing. New word, because it's not to be understand something, it's to go inward, to understand the truth of what's going on in us, paying attention to the times that our negative thoughts are running around. And in grief, there's a lot of them. In grief, there is so much that keeps telling you, you're not doing this right. And don't you wish you had done this? Or shouldn't you have said that? And we go through all the what ifs and the whys and the wherefores, and we can really get into punishing ourselves. And so it's a really important marker to shift some of that thinking. And I like the fact that thinking is a function. Thoughts aren't your reality. You're having thoughts. And let's face it, don't believe all of those thoughts. They'll steer you wrong. What won't steer you wrong is your heart. Question your thoughts, and I like what Brené Brown says here. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? So when we're having a lot of those negative thoughts, especially the kinds of what ifs and I should have done this and I should be further along in my grief. I mean, it's been 3 months. Excuse me. Wait until it's been a few years. Wait until you've, given yourself that compassion, that kindness to move at your own pace. We cannot rush a process. We want to, desperately. But you're not going to sit in the same place of it. Things will gently shift and soften as we work intentionally on the process. But it isn't going to change overnight. One of the other things that, is a huge misconception is the word closure. To close on grief. How can that be possible? How can I possibly close on my relationship with my mother? Or my relationship with any of my losses? They're always going to be a part of me. They're woven into my being. I'll have memories, and in those memories, sadness will come up. We do not close on grief. What we do is we reconcile. So reconciliation is a much softer word. It's a different way of framing it. It gives us a different perception on it. But when someone says, oh, you need closure, I'm like, no, I'm not buying a house. This is my unique grief that I'm going through. I'm never going to forget that person, that love, the beloved. And neither should we have to. So that's not what we're about. When we're processing, when we're working through this major loss, we're reconciling, having to come to terms that they are not here anymore. And that's the hardest thing for us as humans. And we'll kick and we'll scream against it. But the brain too has to have time to integrate this, like a computer system. There's a big void there. And you'll go into patterning of, oh, I need to call my mum, it's Sunday. Oh gosh, she's no longer here. So we'll do a lot of these things. And as I say, you know, if anyone is interested in that piece, that's a whole other subject, but, you know, learning more about grief brain, trauma brain, again, YouTube, Google. But it's a fascinating area because it's really letting us know we are not crazy. This is grief. This is loss. This is embodied trauma that we're working with. Another just little tip, I find this very helpful. When we do get stuck in our thought states, to think about thoughts as being in 4 different states. We can get caught in the loop, we take them seriously, and we do that a lot with grief. But if we stop to consider, is it true? That's going to start shifting. If we can be at rest, be in the quiet, it's going to start shifting. And then being inspired. Did you know you cannot be in a state of fear or anxiety when you're being creative? The two cannot work together. So finding inspiration, finding things to be inspired about is a wonderful way. But what we're really talking about this evening is about, well, how do we get beyond the 3D stuff of grief and loss? How do we really open up deeper and more? But we still have to do all of this work. That's always key. You still got to do the grind. You still got to work through the emotions, work through the stuff, work through the pain. That's imperative. But as we go, as we begin to allow ourselves to feel it, to experience it, to accept that grief is here, and the way forward is to process, to mourn, to let all of that grief out in so many different ways. Some people need to share the story. We need to tell. We need to be able to speak to someone compassionate who'll listen and who won't say, oh, you know, it's like, you know, you've been talking about this a lot lately. Perhaps, you know, you should look for closure. Don't just walk away. Find someone who can give you that beautiful, soft place to fall. Because it doesn't matter how many times you need to tell your story, to share what needs to be shared. Grief demands the voice. Grief demands to be expressed in writing, in art, in music, in a walk. It will come through angrily and ferociously. It will come through softly. But when given its voice, it will keep moving through. And then when we have help and support, then we can feel that validation. We can feel, oh, this is how it is. This is how it works. And then we get stuck again in our own minds about, you know, what's going on. But keep acknowledging our feelings. And as we allow more and more the heart to be open to those grief feelings, to that, you know, to allow that to be willing. And the breath, wonderful. It's kind of like, that's one of those no-brainer statements. Well, you need to breathe, you know? But we can use it so effectively. And what I love is how currently there are so many different apps that you can get to learn how to use your breath in really positive and experiential ways that will calm down that nervous system, that will give you respite. And it's simple techniques. Again, simple doesn't mean it's easy because you've got to do the practice. But in all of my groups, in all of my trainings that I do with clients and with volunteers, breath work is fundamental. It's an important piece that we bring in and that we keep knowing that when we are overwhelmed and when you get what I call a little grief bubble that comes up, because they can happen at any time. I remember sharing this with the group. I was simply walking across my living room and a shaft of sunlight came through, and for some reason, I still don't know why, I suddenly thought, I'm never going to hear my mother's voice. Boom, out of nowhere. boom comes the grief bubble. Sob. I have to let it go. I know enough. I've done enough to not swallow it down and get on with what I was doing. No, this demands that sacred pause. This is important. This is beautiful. It's mourning, allowing the sadness because of the love. But that practice of giving ourselves compassion in those moments, and we can't always do it. You know, if you're in Albertsons at the frozen vegetables and something makes that happen, which it will, it can be the simplest thing. It might not be the best place for you to just, you know, sob. But I've done it over the frozen peas, would you believe? And a friend of mine just happened to be in the store and she came up behind me and she goes, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm not." I was just sobbing into the frozen pea section. But you know, it is hard for us. You know, it's really hard for us as human beings to be that authentic, to allow and to be in that space. And so we have to measure it, and we have to, you know, maybe use our car. I find the car is really good. Sit in the car somewhere in a car park that nobody's going to hear you. Shower in the water. Whatever your thing is, we allow, and we breathe through it. I want to share with you the metaphor of the butterfly. This was a thought that came to me at 6 a.m. this morning. I don't know if that happens to you guys. You know, you get a little inspiration. I'm like, oh, I need to do the butterfly. And so butterfly came to me and she said, I don't come into form in this beautiful way easily. I don't just show up here in my authentic self without working extremely hard. And if you know the life cycle of the butterfly, and you don't have to, this isn't, you know, anything dramatic, but just starts off in the pupae, isn't that what you call it?
Eggs and then larvae.
Eggs and the larva and the pupae. But without going into a whole biology share, the caterpillar has to work really hard in there. It actually, this is a little unpleasant, it becomes mush. I mean, it literally becomes a sack of fluid. So it dissolves. The old self dissolves. The old self is let go, and what is formed in there is the awakening to this incredible, authentic self. And then and then she has to work, because if she doesn't work to get out, it's like a chick with an egg. If we bash the egg open, the chick will die. We have to work. That's what suffering is about. We have to work to be able to step into that transformative state. So it's in nature in everything. But we forget that. And we forget that there is a beautiful end to all of this. I just got to keep going. I've just got to get there before I can have wings, before I can truly start to shine. And we're not going to shine all at once. We're going to shine in little ways, in little pieces. But a big part of the work that I do in my private practice is that I work with past life regression. Now, I use that term, but I will also say there is no time. So there is no past and there is no future. I know that'll blow a few of our minds, won't it? But we've had many lifetimes. Some of you may go along with that, some of you may not, and that's okay. I have worked with so many individuals that have experienced grief and trauma that then links in to something from another lifetime. I love what Leonard Jacobs says about healing the pain of all these lifetimes that we've had. It's the soul journey. It's our journey. All of your past selves are walking behind you like a shadow, waiting for you to awaken fully, waiting for you to return home to the oneness, to love, wisdom, silence, and compassion. It's not just the child who's walking behind you. All the identities from past incarnations are still with you. The seeker, the pirate, the highwayman, the sage, each of them applauding every step you take. And should you, in this lifetime, go further along the path of awakening than ever before, then all of your past life identities go with you. Your learning is their learning. Your fulfillment is their fulfillment. Your completion is their completion, for they have been on the same journey as you. Your return home is their return home, and they will surrender lovingly into you, for you are the true master. We've forgotten that deeply. You are the true master. You found the way upon their behalf, and they will disappear into you. The past will disappear into the present. There's only one journey, the journey of the soul. And so what I find when I work with individuals who feel like they're a little bit stuck, or that they've had other major things coming to them, experiences coming to them, or that I just can't get past this. Sometimes, not always, when I've worked and done a past life regression or some kind of hypno-regression and connecting into our authentic, our divine self, something will pop up. Something will show and say, well, when you were a warrior in this life, the person that you are bereft for, your beloved, well, you killed them in that life. Or they rescued you. Or they did whatever. And what we find out is that we have these incredible soul contracts. Many shamans, many renowned speakers talk about, this soul contract that we have, this soul journey of before we come in, of saying to another soul, will you show up and help me? I'm not dealing with loss real well. I want to really practice that because I've got so much that I've got to heal, that I've really, dug in. There's a ton of it. Can you come in and just love me enough to leave me? And they're like, I love you so much, of course I will. Have any of you heard of the Little Soul in the Sun by Neil Donald Walsh? Yeah, it's a lovely book which shares that kind of a story. And again, in my Life Between Life work, I see this time and time and time again, of the contracts that we have. I worked with a young girl whose sister had died to suicide, and in really traumatic circumstances. She'd hung herself. So really just incredibly awful for the family, just terrible. And this was many years later that she came to me. And we did a very deep Life Between Life sessions, which is you go further than the past life, very like the quantum healing experience, the hypnosis. It's about a 3 to 4 hour session. But what she found out, her sister had left at that point for her to find herself. But her sister was actually much more evolved than she ever knew. She was her guide. And she was then connected to her in the session, and she was able to, in meditation, connect with her and ask for her support, ask for her help. And it was an incredible experience. It was so beautiful. So there are many, experiences that we perhaps don't even realize that are part of our akash, part of our records, part of our soul contract. I do want to say just a tiny little bit about reincarnation and that whole experience of being written out of our history. Because at the beginning of the Christian era, reincarnation, it was a pillar of belief. It was absolutely solid. And early church elders, theologians like Origenes, Basilides, and St. Gregory taught reincarnation of the soul as a matter of course. It was written in the Bible. In 553 AD, a major turning point to Christianity, the recognition of reincarnation was declared a doctrine of heresy. We can't have people believing that. Because if you believe that you're going to come in again and again, you're not going to pay your monies to the monks. You're not going to buy holy relics to make sure this life is, you've got it all down. So yeah, and it was a maneuver by the emperor, and it was all about political gain and control and subversion. Isn't that just amazing? And again, you can obviously go research that a little more. But this was reincarnation as a fundamental teaching in so many religions, so many cultures. And like I say here, the term past life itself, it's not exactly accurate, as I alluded to, because the past, it doesn't exist in a quantum state, what we call a quantum state. There's no time. Time's in a circle, so you're always looking at the potentials of now. But what we heal now in this life cuts through all of the other pieces. Like Leonard Jacobson was saying, what I'm healing now, I'll heal that life and that life and that life. And if we think of ourselves as the central pillar in this moment and all of those lifetimes around us, but there's this one that's unhealed and is a huge trauma, and I'm carrying that and that weight of mother loss or spouse loss or brother or whatever it is. Edgar Cayce, just to say a little bit here, the Cayce approach to reincarnation focused on practical ways of dealing with life in the here and now by living, growing, and being of service in the present. And Cayce was really worked at, it's not as important who we've been so much as it is how our past actions affect our present conditions, what opportunities and challenges we face because of it. So with any kind of past life story, it's not about the story so much, and I'll re-emphasize that with some sharing that I'm going to do. It's not about getting hooked into the story of who I think I was or the name that I was given around that, Queen Nefertiti or whatever it is. I don't want to get lost in that story, but it's the elements of what took place. It's how is that impacting me now? What is it about that I'm carrying that's embodied that I need to heal, which is going to then help me here in the now, in that healing space. Another term that's often used in this field and around this work is the Akash. The Akashic records. I really love the work of Lee Carroll. He channels Cryon and has been doing so for like 20 years. And within the Akashic record, what is said here, and this is also, again, this is many authors will relate to this too. We have a multidimensional record of each life, all the energies of accomplishment, all unfinished business, karmic group attributes, the attributes of our soul group, talents and abilities, all spiritual growth, and a quantum record of what you've done and all your potentials to come. So gosh, that opens up some potential for what we might access through deep connection, or what can come through our spiritual doorway if we're open, if we can keep allowing to have some of that knowing, to use some of that talent and abilities that seeps through. And as you become more and more authentic on our journey, as we open up to those things, it happened to me. I found that all of a sudden I had to paint. I had to paint like my life depended on it. And I bought canvas and I bought acrylics, and I hadn't painted since I was 17, you know, and I did some art at school. But this was not little paint, this was big canvases. And it was expressive, and I was like, wow, where's this coming from? Could it be I was accessing me in another lifetime, because I was doing a ton of healing at the time? So in my practice, I use hypnoregression, and hypnosis makes past life recall easier because it bypasses our critical is a mouthful, critical conscious mind, and we access our subconscious or even super consciousness. So that's another term for accessing more of the quantum self, the authentic divine aspect. And the subconscious is not limited by our imposed boundaries of logic, space and time. It can remember everything from any time. Another wonderful author, teacher, Dr. Brian Weiss. Any of his books will inspire, and all of the evidence that he's collected with his patients and his clients of healing some of those old lifetimes, and then everything seems to clear that was a block for that person in their healing journey of their trauma. And why hypnoregression is so helpful is because we can access the different types of memories throughout the experience. We can access facts, data, story. We can access the emotional memories, those deep memories that we hide, that we defend against, and the physical memory. And then, of course, the soul memory. And when we can reconcile, when we can assimilate some of these things, a lot of that can come together. And this is where transformation can start to take place. We're transforming ourselves internally by healing these deep traumas that we didn't even realize we'd been carrying because of this huge grief experience, this well of grief that we're carrying and holding to. As Brian Weiss says, when my patients remembered themselves in their other lives, the traumas that had brought them to see me in the first place were erased and in some cases cured. Trauma will occur to us many times. We need to grieve it. We need to process it. When we are in a state of grief, if we don't process it, move through it, that will become trauma. It becomes embodied. And we carry that through. And we've carried this through many lifetimes. These old traumas, they're in the energy field, and they can be triggered when traumatic experiences and similar events occur in the current lifetime. When we're able to work a lot of this through and keep opening ourselves at that heart level, connecting to our divine self, following inspirations and little intuitions. It's not necessarily going to be, you know, the big aha moment. It's subtle. It's you know, the tiny little things. It's the right person shows up, or you come to a talk and something resonates. And that resonation, it's in your soul, and it's saying, I think this might be helpful. Or have you ever walked into a library or a bookstore and the book literally falls off the shelf? That's happened to me many times. Or a good friend says, you need to read this. I think you'll find that helpful. Did you see this documentary? You know, things come our way, that magical synchronicity. So being open to that transformation. Because when we're ready, things start to fall into place. And this is why I've led in with all of the information. Well, it's really an overview of grief and loss. Because, you know, in that initial phase, we're so stuck in the deep pain, in that sorrow, in that depth of despair, that we're not ready to, you know, go up to the spiritual transformation path. You know, I'm in it. It's like it's not there yet. I'm not ready for that. And so we've always got to be at a place where the timing is appropriate. Timing's everything. We can't force it. Or sometimes it will force itself on us. So I thought I'd share a few little things with you about my own journey. I've had quite a few, but I'll only pick a couple. The first one that I'll share with you that happened to me was I was 12. And as a 12-year-old child, we were in Scotland on a little holiday with parents. And we were in a little caravan. Thank you, camper. A little camper van. It's only a small one. And we'd been out Loch Lomond or somewhere, and we were in a really rural area. And I was on the bottom bunk, snuggled in my sleeping bag, all zipped up. And I was always chilly as a child, so my sleeping bag was well zipped. It was up here. But what happened in the night was somebody came in. I woke to somebody unzipping the bag, looming over me, and I screamed. As you can imagine, 12 years old, little girl, screamed loudly. And this figure went, they left. My mum got up. Now my mum, very practical, immediately said, "You're just having a nightmare. Nothing's here, everything's fine. That was a gust of wind." And she totally, for her it was the right thing to do. She was scared. She didn't know what was happening. I've moved through that part. But it was very traumatic for me to not be believed. Something was here. Something was so, frightening. And I went, into that little logical place. But the floor's wet. There's grass on the floor. The door was open. You're just dreaming. It's a bad dream. Go back to sleep. It'll all be okay. What that did was that sent me into a traumatic state. But what happened was I had nightmares of being swirling. I'd never had anything like it. I had it since, and I'll link the dots. I couldn't close my eyes. I was swirling. And it was like I was going down into a funnel. And it was just this horrible experience. And that went on. It came and went for a number of weeks. But it never went any further at that time, which I'm so glad about, as I wouldn't have been able to understand it at that age. But we were in Scotland. We had been near the loch. I'd touched into a space and a place that was very familiar to my soul. 20 years later, I was doing some healing work, and I hit this lifetime. I'd been drowned as a healer in a Scottish loch, and I had the very same imagery and sensation and feeling and experience. The trauma had prompted that to come to the surface, and then my soul was going, I don't think she's quite ready for this yet. Let's hold off. Let's hold off. There'll be a time and a space for that to come up and be explored. And I had committed to my own path of awakening. I'd committed to know more. I wanted to know more, gracefully, easily. I didn't learn to say that until after my car accident. But grace and ease is always welcome in my experience, because otherwise we might bring things in just a little too fast, because grace will come in ferociously as much as she'll come in with softness and ease. So just remember that. But we can have, when we're ready, we can have downloads. You might not understand them. It might just be a little bit of inner awareness. It might be, I don't know why, but I'm pulled to go live in America. This was me. I'm pulled to go to that country. I don't know what it is. Don't know why. something about Phoenix, Arizona. I don't even like the desert. What is it about that place? I wonder. Many lifetimes. Many, many lifetimes. But none of this happened until I was ready. And the biggest one, just to share, was that, it's like when you're ready, the teacher will appear. And I did have a beautiful mentor that came into my life. And her name was Maureen. And she's still there. But she introduced me to a different way of being, to spirit guides, to mediumship, to all of these different things. And every time it would blow my mind a little bit more. And I'd be like, whoa, really? I don't know about this. Still teetering on that. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure. But then I had my own crazy experience. So I was working with my mentor, and we were invited to go to a friend's wedding. Maureen, she was a medium then, clairvoyant, psychic, regression therapist, the whole thing. Just a beautiful person. And I'd had these traumas in my life. I was going through a really awful bereavement and divorce. And she was helping me heal these. But there was so much that I didn't seem to be able to shift. There was so much I seemed to be stuck in on with the trauma. And so we went to this friend's wedding, Scotland again. I tell you, that place has got more trouble for me than I care to share. And we had some extra time. And Maureen wanted to go to Findhorn. Anybody heard of Findhorn? Findhorn is an incredible place, magical place in Scotland, where it was set up back in the 60s. It was a spiritual foundation for connecting to nature, bringing in nature spirits, just beautiful. And Maureen had been a part of that. So she said, let's go. I want to go. Well, we were in this little tiny village called Strathfeffer, miles from anywhere. Classic little Scottish village. So the movie Planes, Trains, Automobiles? That was almost us. It took us like 4 hours or something to get to Findhorn. But the last leg of the journey, we were on a little minibus, little Scottish minibus, pottering through the countryside. Nothing, big lots, mountains, fantastic scenery. And we're sitting there and just enjoying it. And then I said, wow, can you hear bagpipes? Wow, did you hear those bagpipes? No. I can hear bagpipes. I really can. I can hear bagpipes. You can't hear those bagpipes? No. And the next thing, I was thrown back into the seat with such a ferocious force to my heart center. I mean, I literally, bam, into the seat. And this bolt, this wave of energy came up, and I just sobbed. I had no idea what the heck was happening to me. But I just crossed some kind of threshold, some kind of point that I had known as a soul, in a lifetime, or a few different lifetimes, which I would uncover at a later time. But that it impacted me so greatly. And I'm just sitting there bawling, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I have no idea. And then the bus got to Findhorn, and I got off the bus. And then I experienced another wonderful part of spontaneous hypno-regression. Well, without the hypno. Purging. Anybody ever done that after some of the spiritual and mystical stuff? On the side of the road. Oh! couldn't do anything about it. And I was vomiting for the next 4 hours. And it was the strangest thing, and I was so thrown by all of this. I had never experienced anything like this in my life prior to this. But I'd asked, I want to know, I want to learn, I want to really open up. I want to know more about my spiritual, who I am. Bring it on, I'd said. That's one of the things I learned, grace and ease. Let's not do it so crazily. Maureen was incredible. She helped me so much. We didn't unpack it in that moment or on, that weekend. We waited until we could do some really deep hypnosis together. And one of the things that happened to me, and I have this image here, because on the journey home, Maureen told me about some of her experiences. When we hear other people's stories, especially of things like past life experiences, sometimes it can activate that kind of thing within us. And she had told me this story about the knight and the lady, and how her and a friend of hers, they both realized that they'd been in other lifetimes and they'd worked through a lot of stuff that they'd had together. They found out that they couldn't be in relationship, but they were deep friends. But in a previous relationship, they'd had this incredibly tragic love affair as the knight and the lady. And she's telling me this story, and I'm just so emotionally devastated by the story. And I'm like, she's just telling me a story. Why do I feel it so greatly? Whatever is it about this? And again, it's about, when we touch into people, places, things, and they impact us, and we don't know why. When you're drawn to certain things or a certain person, and you don't understand what it is that's resonating at such a deep level. And we had a hypnotherapy session. Well, what's so important is we've got to go into that dark. We've got to go into the fear, and it's so frightening. When we have support, it really is helpful. But even then, I couldn't quite go there. I couldn't quite go into it. I had to call in some help. And what was beautiful, this sweet little angel in my meditative state showed up with a little lantern. Come on, follow me. So off we went. And then I'm in a Scottish open field, and I'm about 10 years old as a little boy, and I'm watching my brother and my father being hewn and hacked to pieces, and I'm in the middle of a battlefield. And I'm just this little boy, totally terrified, and I die. Well, that's going to cause a few, stirrings over lifetimes. That's what I'd impacted when we went through on the minibus. But Maureen knew to say, keep going, keep going. What else is here? What's impacting her now? What is it that she is still embodying and carrying in this life? Oh, I couldn't go. There's nothing. It's dark. I can't see. I can't feel anything. I can't. Where's that angel again? Bring that angel in. Bring that light in. Oh, look, there's a treasure chest. Open the chest. It's okay. I opened the chest. Out flew a name. Lancelot. I bawled. Well, that's actually an understatement. I let out a primal scream so loud, Maureen told me later, I seriously thought they'd come for you, that they'd bring the straitjackets or we'd have the police round. But it wasn't anything I could control. It was so deep, it was so raw, and it just poured out of me. I couldn't contain it. It was not possible. All that trauma just poured out with just the one word. Out, out, out it came. Like I say, the story's not the important part. The emotional wounding around that was the right word for me. That was the right story for me. And honestly, I couldn't look at a white horse for months after. If I saw a white horse in a field, I'd bawl again. In fact, I told my brother the whole thing, and he bought for me for my birthday this beautiful photo album with something like very similar, and a knight on a white horse, and oh my God, bawling it. So it's so interesting, how fascinating that emotional embodiment that we have, that is other lifetime experience. Now, not everybody is going to have such a dramatic, I hope, introduction. You really don't. You don't want to like the following day, Maureen took us out for a drive, and I was again purging, more purging. We had to keep stopping it, okay, pull over, out you go. And I remember her saying, "Chrissy, I've never seen anybody throw up so elegantly. You did such a nice job." I'm like, "Oh God, but I've had enough. I don't want to keep doing this." But my whole being was just saying, we're getting through this. We're getting done with it. This is what you've asked for. You're on fast track. And I was. And I didn't put the dots together because I was on fast track, because I was coming here to this country. And I'd been given this year. And I crammed in so many spiritual experiences and crazy stuff. But if I'd known all of that beforehand, do you think I'd have signed up? I'd have run for the hills, seriously. But I needed to do a lot of that deep, trauma healing to be in a place where I could then begin the journey that I was meant to begin here. But it's the going into the dark that's such a hard thing for us, going into the fear. And we have to trust. We have to keep trusting our own intuition, and really only do it with somebody who is safe. Because we'll talk about, very briefly, there are many ways you can do this work. You don't, have to do it through hypnoregression. There are many different experiences that will bring you into that space, that will help you heal some of those old traumas. And why do we need to heal this old stuff? So that we can keep opening that heart space. We can access more of our own divine self with every movement, with every shift. Because it was after that my intuition really kicked in. And then, again, more story later, much, much more. My light language came in. Again, something to bring through as a from my own higher aspect. Light language is sound, frequency, channeled light, if you like. I was saying to some friends that there has just been a really incredible psychotronics conference with Dannion Brinkley as a speaker and many, many others. And they were recording the different effect on healing by some of these psychotronic devices that emit sounds, frequencies, resonance. Do you know what top of the list was for the highest resonance and healing capacity? Light language. It was triple many of the other things. So, what we bring through for our own, there's some angels, I think, just hanging out, chiming in there. So, why do I mention that? Well, we never know what other incredible pieces that we're supposed to bring through, not just for our healing, but for the benefit of others. We only use such a fraction of the truth of who we are. And there's so much more, especially now, in these times that we're going through. You see many posts, light workers, wake up. Time to step into your pure beingness. Time to, get it on, kind of thing. Well, it is. It's very true. But we're also having to heal, I just went through that pretty quick. We're having to heal too as a group consciousness. We're having to heal catastrophic events, other things that have happened to us. I know that there will be some here who have Atlantean or Lemurian memories, or those memories of catastrophic events, and those are an important piece of the healing journey that we do also. I worked with a really lovely woman who she was needing to get through some very deep grief, incredible stuff, that multiple bereavements. And so we did a very big session together. She had died in the Holocaust. And that was so embodied for her. It took a fair bit to clear that one. But that then was a huge release for her to then really work on the stuff of now. And it just became easier, because that was the doorway that was opening and saying, but this route, this one that you're currently in, is a signal. But there's more here, there's deeper, there's other work. And sometimes we'll just feel that intuitively. We don't always know or understand why. But certainly, you know, as a collective, we are dealing with, you know, so many different catastrophes. You know, and things surface for us. Traumas surface, fear, PTSD, and so yeah, it can be helpful to do a little research, to go do some reading around some of these things. Gaia TV has some incredible people on. I don't know if you're a fan, I am. Barbara Hanclau, wonderful, beautiful woman who's written so much. She talks about, as a collective, the importance of healing these catastrophic events that we've been through, because we're in a changing consciousness right now. And so to go forward, we need to heal a lot of this really deep-rooted trauma in order for us to move through. Sarah Breskman is Sarah Breskman Cosme is another hypno-regression therapist. She does a lot of hers. I'm never comfortable to film my clients in that way, but she does a lot of beautiful service work, because we get to witness and we get to see how people move through these experiences. So yeah, there's a lot to clue into there. I want to say a little piece about the importance of any of the work that we're up to. What are we really getting down into with any of it? It's always about healing at the level of being able to forgive. Forgiveness is our bridge to our awakening. Forgiveness is the tool. And one of the things that we get hung up on is the idea that if, you know, we're forgiving the person. No, we're forgiving the event, the behavior, and we've just forgotten that they're a soul who signed up to do this with us. You know, so we kind of have to reframe it a little bit. We have to recognize, you know, that soul, and sometimes we can only do that when we're in that deep state of hypno-regression or meditation, because our conscious mind will get in the way. You're going to forgive that bastard? And you're like, I can't possibly do that, you know. Well, we get hung up and we cling to those things, and they do not serve us. Again, it's just more layers of trauma that we hold to. And so part of my work is always to ensure that when we access this information, when we're healing, we heal at that deep level of forgiveness. And so reframing it, recognizing there are no victims here, in truth. But that's from that higher level, not from the down here level, where we get caught into what's going on between this country, and this is terrible, and this is, you know, victims here. Hang on a minute, let's pull up. Take a breath. Gosh, what if all of these souls actually signed up for this? Whoa. That's amazing. Can't always be there though, can we? It's hard. I know it is for me sometimes. But that's the truth of it. When we get right down into it, at that spiritual, that really deep, beautiful level, we are all souls on a journey to awaken. We're all here to get back to love, to oneness. And there is, in truth, no separation, but we are so lost in it. We're just so lost in it. So yes, forgiveness can be done, and it is possible. Sometimes it'll just come in a dream. You know, you might have a dream. I remember I had one of my ex, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. I must be ready. I must be ready to do that. And I was. And I let it go. It's like, wow, amazing. Did it surface a little bit again? It did. Okay, another layer needed. So that's the thing, isn't it? There's often other layers, other pieces. But when we can get to that level of forgiveness, it's deeply healing and transformative for us. So different methods to access. There are many. I've only thrown up a few here in terms of accessing those deep trauma soul wounds. Yes, so through superconsciousness, quantum or LBL hypnotherapy, the quantum hypnotherapy CHt. We actually have a therapist here. Hand up. She'll tell you all about it. Again, it's very similar to the Life Between Lives hypnotherapy that was pioneered by Dr. Michael Newton, which again, it's really about you going into that superconsciousness quantum state to access the higher self, all-knowing, all-understanding, and to heal what's needed. We might go in thinking, oh, I need to heal this. And then you're shown this, and you're like, oh, whoa, okay. I had no idea about that. But our higher self is always guiding us and leading us to what is required. Anyone that does any kind of shamanic journeying that you have a recommendation for, fantastic. I think plant-based medicine can be incredible, but again, make sure that person really knows what they're doing, that they are a reliable, experienced practitioner, because especially with plant medicine, there's a lot of purging potential, and it can be rough. Well, it's the same thing with any of our deep journeys to heal, to transform that deep-rooted pain. It might be simple to process, but deep in there, it's hard. You know, it's hard work to face up to this old wound, these old fears, to emote that heavy sorrow, that heavy despair that you've touched into because of the bereavement that you're experiencing in current time. So, you know, it takes a lot for us to do this deep work, which means we've got to be kind to ourselves and not expect too much, and always grace and ease in the softest possible way. So I'll just put I'm looking at the time, my contact info here. I love the happy dolphin. Sweet little dolphin. So, and just to show you, you can, if you go to it's on the video hosting platform is HowTube. You may not have heard of that one. It's more of an educational platform. And my address on there is Ascending Soul. And that looks like this. There you go. And all my videos are there, video series, and you can play. There's a couple of different things on there you can play to find out more about the work I do in past life regression, parallel regressions, life between lives. Yeah, there's a couple of short meditations on there for you to clue into. So yeah, I have some. Okay, thank you. The brain's gone now. It's totally vegging out there. And if you want to be on my email list, I am currently offering a past life session. Is usually can be 2 hours, sometimes a little more. I don't cut anybody off. I won't say, okay, your time's up, we're going to go now. I mean, if you're in the middle of something incredible, we're not going to do that. So the sessions have a different price than what I'm going to charge on here, because I always give a discount anyway. And currently, I'm going to do them at 125. which is a good deal. So if you want that deal, sign up and I will give you info. Because I've not changed the pricing yet on the, so you know, don't go in and pay full price at the moment. You don't need to. But if anybody is interested in that or just wants to talk more or even have a consultation. Anyway, I think maybe questions are with it. You, sir.
Yeah, I have a couple. One is a comment, one's a question. The comment part is, I've always been confused about, you know, in the ultimate sense, everything is happening now, you know.
Yeah.
There's no past and there's no future.
Yeah.
And I saw something about that from an authoritative source. I wish I could remember what it was, but it struck me that as long as we are in time, space, and gravity, that there is past and future. When we transcend beyond time and space, which is, you know, in our cards, evolutionary-wise, then everything we can access all at once. Yeah, that was helpful to me.
And of course, when we're in the experience of quantum
Sure.
consciousness,
Right.
when we're accessing at that deep level or higher level, using our super consciousness, that's when there is no time and space.
Right.
And that's what we're accessing when we go into these deeper states, these deeper spaces. And that's when, you know, with the connection to our divine self, I use that term. So you can put in a different terminology for that: divine self, higher self, Holy Spirit. It's that divine essence of all knowing that we're connecting to. And so the information isn't coming from our conscious mind. It's coming from, and it's not a thought, it's a knowing. And it drops in like a package of feeling and unpacks. It's incredible.
And the question part was, I have tried 4 times to be past life regressed,
Have you?
and I have not been able to find anybody who can actually do it.
Bless your heart. Are you giving me a challenge?
Yeah, I'm giving you a challenge. I really am.
How about we talk about it, and I'll only charge you if we do it.
Okay, that's a deal.
Cool.
Thank you.
I'd love to assist you with that, and also find out why.
Yeah, me too.
We'll start with
I
that.
know I have some defenses up in some way.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I've worked with a few guys who had those defenses
Okay,
up,
good, good.
and it was fun.
Thank you.
I'll do some of my hypno jiu-jitsu moves on you.
Great, I love it.
It's gentle, I promise. It's gentle. No, we have to. Sometimes we just have to try different routes and different ways, and but there's a reason for it too. Sometimes it is timing. I had another client who totally wanted to do the whole past life experience. He was a footballer, big guy, massive guy. He took up all the room in my chair, and we couldn't get anywhere. So I said, okay, let's check in with your higher self. What the reason why? He was a young soul, new soul. He wasn't meant to go exploring all of that. That's why he was an adrenaline junkie. He was doing all the stuff on this planet that needed to be learned through, and it wasn't relevant to him to know anything else about anything else but this one. And we also connected in though for him to know something about purpose and to utilize some other pieces within him. But as for checking out other storylines, other life, wasn't for him. So that was purposeful. He found out why. He didn't. It's like, okay, we go in with an idea, but your higher self has a completely different agenda for why you show up, and that's always true. You had a question.
So I was just going to ask: is the way that you do your work, is it the way that Michael Newton did his?
Yeah. So with the life between life hypnotherapy, I was taught by Michael Newton. So that is, I've adapted it a little bit for the times and the consciousness that we're in, but it's a long process. It's one where we access through another lifetime, through that other lifetime, to go into the more quantum space, to connect with your higher self, your soul group, to connect with whatever is lined up there for you. However, if you've read his books, and you come in thinking that you're going to do the counsel and you're going to do this, your higher self may have a whole other plan for you
No.
of information sometimes, and it can be, okay, well, you need to know that we've got to go over to this planet experience, or something that you'd never even thought about. So just having that room for, okay, we might veer off here. I prefer to do that than just stick to the regime, because I don't know why you're here. And if I put in my agenda, we'll check with your soul group, we'll check in with a few of those things, but then I want to leave it open for the true reason you're there, that I have no idea about, your higher self does. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for everybody who's been listening or who's going to listen to this. Blessings, and thank you very much.